I was absolutely thrilled to be asked, and been really looking forward to this. I love doing this sort of thing, and just helping writers. I was saying to Shane just before we came on, I need as much help as I can get with my writing. So if I can lend my little bit of expertise to others, then job done as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to share screen. So I always pause when I share screen because I can't multitask. So that means I'm doing something other than looking at the. There we go. Now, hopefully you're all seeing that. Is that all right, Shane? You got that? Yeah. We did test this earlier, so we did. So that's me. So I'm going to talk about writing credible fiction. Now, I just want to say that you probably those of you that have kind of looked into what I do. I usually do crime advice, police procedural advice, but this isn't about crime. This is a very broad approach about how to apply research, how to research facts, how to research procedures and different people's worlds, and how to apply it to fiction. So whilst I'll probably refer to crime as I'm going through, I'm not going to dwell on how to research a crime novel. This is broader than that, and hopefully therefore more helpful. So why did they ask me to get involved in this? So I'm a best-selling crime writer. I've had 2 non-fictions and 2 novels out. The 2 non-fictions I wrote with a chap called Peter James, who some of you might know, and the two novels, Bad for Good and Force of Hate, I wrote on my own, so I've kind of the reason I put that on there is because I'm going to come on to later about the importance of trying to find people that understand your world as writers, and understand the needs of story and characters, and of course, our own anxiety as writers as well, because we're all anxious people in terms of getting our stories right, and not messing it up, and not having facts get in the way of a good story. And I'll we'll talk all about that later. So my background is I'm a former police officer, 30 plus years service in Sussex. I was a detective for most of that time, but then my final job was I was in charge of the police in Brighton and Hove. So I was the kind of divisional commander for Brighton and Hove, which meant that I had to retrain in a lot of areas, including public order and firearms command. So I've got a very broad understanding of policing, but you'll see in, I think, the last slide or the penultimate slide, my bank of experts that cover areas that I'm not an expert in, because none of us be an expert in everything. I'm more or less a full-time police advisor to writers and TV makers now, and I write. There's probably about 150 authors, and probably about about a dozen or so TV programs that I've advised on in different ways, and I advise for people right at the top of the game in terms of writing, people like Anthony Horowitz, Peter James, Mark Billingham, people like that, right the way down to people just starting out, and debut novelists, aspiring novelists, even students. And it's a great leveler procedure, because even though people have been selling books for years, sometimes they've been getting it wrong for years as well. So I quite enjoy working with all levels. I run a suite of crime writing courses with the Professional Writing Academy. Just had one on Saturday. Just finished a 4-week course about a week ago. So they cover. There's workshops on particular themes, and they also cover, the 4-week one covers basically writing a murder, and we set a murder up, and then not a real one, and then we ask the people to spend the 4 weeks writing it, dripping in advice and things in real, and what they would expect as an investigator to get in real time. So we try and emulate that. And I also teach on some crime writing masters programs as well. So that's me. So I want to kind of talk about the procedures, the principles of procedural advice. I call it procedural advice, the principles of expert advice. And these are I kind of tend to use this as the first slide on all my presentations, because I think it's worth remembering these facts, because whatever you are seeking out whatever advice you're needing, whatever expert you're looking to engage with, the whole point is that the story and your characters are paramount. That there is nothing more important than your story and your characters. So you'll expect the expert, and I'll come on to this later on. I would expect the expert to work with your story, with your characters, rather than against them, because the advice you're getting, the experts' support is merely scaffolding for your story. Your story is the building, and the advice and the expert intervention, it just merely makes it stand up in a real world. My view is that unless you're writing fantasy, your story must be credible. I don't use the term realistic because realistic things are often very dull, but it must be credible. Your story must be something that, even if it's out of the ordinary. I mean, my latest book, up with the body count I had in the city where I used to be the police commander, was astronomical. But hopefully the world that I created and the characters I created around made that possible. So the credible stories, plausible characters, characters that your readers can buy into. No one wants an information dump, and we talk quite a lot about that later on. About you're going to find out lots of stuff, and you really don't need to use it all, but it's good to know. So no one wants you to kind of just create a textbook. If they want to buy a textbook, they'll go and buy a textbook, but they're looking for your book to entertain them. They're looking for to pick up your book and page turn it. And I would doubt whether anyone has page turned a police procedural textbook, because they're very dull. However, understanding, so all this level of knowledge that you're going to get, understanding aids poetic license. So what I mean by that is that if you've got, if you understand, say you're writing a hospital drama, and you understand about heart surgery, because you want to write a scene where your protagonist is going through undergoing heart surgery. Now, I don't know what heart surgery involves, but I can be pretty sure that if I found out, I wouldn't want to put every step, every medical procedure, every infection control measure and it on the page. But what I would want to know, I'd want to know enough of that so that I can then make a creative decision as to how far I veer from it and what I gloss over. I remember once I was advising Peter James, and he called me up. I was watching my son play cricket, and he called me up. Great timing, and I'm kind of yeah. And he said, "Oh, I need to know about how the police manage offenders when they're released from custody, dangerous offenders." And I spent about an hour talking him through something called the multi-agency public protection arrangements. Just thinking, I'm giving you far too much here. I don't, you've got to please, literally, because it's a very, very detailed and intricate set of arrangements. When I picked the book up, when it had finished, it was about 3 lines. He covered it off in 3 lines because he kind of learnt it. He'd understood it. He go, yeah, I need this bit and this bit and this bit just to take my story on, and that's how to use the procedure. And the good news is that most things aren't rocket science, unless it's rocket science, and there's always a way around things. So if you start from that first principle that the story is king, there's always a way around things, and if you choose the right expert, they'll help you find that. Okay, so just a reminder, I'm talking about thriller writing here, but any writing really. What is good thriller writing? What is good writing? Well, it makes the tedious dramatic. So it makes, there's a lot of procedure, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of protocols in anyone's world, whether you're a police officer or you make cars for a living. There's a lot of things that are a little bit dull. So the trick is to find the humanity in procedure. There was an excellent drama in the UK called The Split, which was basically centered around a firm of divorce lawyers. Now, obviously the divorce element to it brings a bit of spice, but they managed to make divorce lawyering really, really dramatic and exciting, and but by finding the humanity in it and putting the people at the center of it. I talked about info dumps earlier. Authenticity in the right way, and showing the tip of the iceberg, just showing enough to move forward, so that your story keeps driving on. Now, there's many ways to research. If you're looking for, if you're looking for what the real world's like to then transfer into your novel writing, but if we just take two obvious ones: research first and write later. Now, a lot of really successful authors do that. I put Peter James, Kathy Reich, who is an anthropologist and writes a lot about bones and things. They'll do their research first, and then the story will come later, and it gives your work authority. It gives people the kind of ability to go, yeah, absolutely buy into that. That sounds about right. You're not going to have to rewrite lots of stuff, particularly around the technical areas, and it does lend itself to those kind of very detailed, plot-driven stories. But it's really easy to get bogged down in that authenticity. It's really it's almost kind of a natural thing to tell everything that you know. And of course, you've only got whatever it is, 80,000 to 100,000 words for your novel, and you're using that at the expense of your drama and your character, and you need to kind of find the balance. You need to kind of make sure that your procedure, as I say, is the scaffolding around the novel, and you can feel compelled to use everything particularly if you're not sure of you've learned a lot of stuff, but you're not sure of what's important and what's not important. So the easy thing is to chuck everything down there. I use the example of, if somebody is arrested in the UK, then the first thing that happens to them is they get taken to a police station, and they're introduced to a custody sergeant, who then reads them goes through their rights when they're in custody, checks their medical fitness, gets them to sign lots of forms. They then have their fingerprints and DNA taken, and and then about 2 hours later they go into an interview. Now, for me, the dramatic bits are the arrest and the interview. So let's just talk about those. Let's have the dramatic part of the arrest, and then cut into the interview where things are going to get spicy, because the rest is just dull. In the real world it's dull, but I don't. I'm sure you're all the same. I don't want my readers to have very much sleep. I want them to be I'm just gonna one more chapter. And if you start a chapter saying, so then the custody sergeant sharpened his pencil and walked over to and you just think, I'll have some sleep, I'll get a good night tonight. So just be careful about not using too much of what you're in. Then there's the flip side of that. It's writing first and research later. And this is where this is what I do now. Obviously I write crime, and I know a lot of stuff around crime anyway, so I'm probably a bit of an advantage, but things that I don't know, this is how I write now. So I because you let your imagination fly, and you've got fewer inhibitions. You just let the story and the characters take you on, and then you can go back and fill in the gaps. Your characters, which are always the things that are always the part of the novel that is going to grip most people, is your character. That you'll naturally descend to focusing on those rather than all this stuff that you've learned. And then, as you can see, it suits psychological, literary, and character-driven work. However, the bottom bullet point is something that I come across quite a lot in my advice, is that you get people that they'll send you a manuscript, and I'll look at it, and one of the things that really that this happens most often in is that you probably know that UK police aren't routinely armed. So if there's a firearms operation in the UK, there are certain people that will carry guns, and it's not the detectives, and there are certain and there are certain authorities and procedures that need to be put in place. Most of them are really dull, but it does mean that you're not going to have your lead character getting a gun out of their top drawer and going out and arresting the suspect. It's just not going to happen. Can you just bear with me? I just need to let my dog out of the room. This is the beauty of working from home. Sorry about that. He'll bark otherwise, so we don't want that. So I kind of get to that point with these manuscripts, and just you just think, oh my God, I'm going to have to, how am I going to break this? And so I end up doing a lot of work with the author, trying to fix things that, you know, if they'd have spoken to me before, it wouldn't have needed fixing. So there's a payoff on both of these. So covered a little bit about this, but as I say, most procedure is mind-numbingly boring. You know, if I told you how a murder is actually investigated, you know, probably 75% of it is sitting around waiting for things, writing stuff down, waiting for people to come back to you, getting authorities for various activities. Really, really, really dull. So the trick is to identify the point of change, identify what when your character is going to have to do or say something which is going to surprise the reader and probably surprise them, and you expand into that. So rather than, you know, one of the things in the UK is with crime is that if the police want to charge somebody so that they can go to court, they have to get the Crown Prosecution Service to authorize it. Nobody wants to see or read the police sitting there waiting for the Crown Prosecution Service to answer the phone or filling out the form that they need to send off and then having the discussion about them. But if the Crown Prosecution Service, and you know, I don't know if there's any Crown Prosecution Service lawyers on the on the meeting, but and I'm not going to disparage you because there's good reasons sometimes. If the Crown Prosecution Service said, no, you can't charge that person you've got in for a double child murder, you know, even that advice is fairly dull, the way that's given. But the anger and the frustration and the throwing the chair back and the shouting at the boss, oh, they've done it again, you know, that's the drama. That's how you show that kind of hour of time that it's taken. So it's identifying that point of change and expanding into it. This is an old TV and film technique. Come in late to your scene and get out early. There's a great author called Simon Toyne who's a master at that. You know, sometimes he comes in so late, you takes you a line or two to work out what's going on, but immediately once you've got past that point, you're right in the drama, and then you're out again. And that he used to make TV dramas and films and stuff. So that's where that comes from. Crunching time down as well. You know, things do take time, and you'll, you know, whether you're researching, as I say, hospital dramas, you know, aviation, you know, how to, you know, flying planes or anything like that. You know, government. You know, if you're writing a political thriller, you know, things take a long time. So don't be frightened to crunch times down. You know, I'm advising authors to do that all the time, particularly around forensic timetables. You don't want to have a 6-week gap in your timeline just because you're waiting for the blood results to come back from a post-mortem. So you know, just take some liberties and crunch it down. And we all know this one, don't we? Show not tell. Because at the end of the day, do you want your readers to come away like they've read a brilliant, convincing, unputdownable story, or a 300-page Wikipedia entry? And I know which I want. So it's all about making the research serve the story and the characters. So okay, so let's pretend that you're writing about an aviation crash. You're talking about an airplane that's crashed into a mountain somewhere, and you've spoken to the world's greatest aviation accident investigator, and Professor whoever it is from the RAF or the USAF or whatever, absolutely the world's go-to, and you can guarantee that he or she is going to absolutely bombard you with information. You will know not only how aviation crashes happen, but how they're investigated and what the common causes are, and etc. And you might wonder why you started the phone call in the first place, because you're getting far too much. And so then you decide you're going to write it. How are you going to write it? So you start writing it. You've got your central character. Your central character perhaps is an aviation accident air accident investigator, and you want your particular scene you're writing is on the mountainside, and she's looking for the black box. She's looking at the wreckage, and she's trying to make sense of what's going on. She's an absolute, she is the fictional world. You've spoken to the real world's expert. She is the fictional world's expert. So she's up a mountain doing that, and your mind is going back to what Professor Blimp, or whatever their name was, told you about what would happen in those situations, and you start to write it down. You start to kind of say, I'm not even going to pretend to know what you would write down, but you're talking of, you might be talking about scene preservation. You're talking about photographing, videoing, swabbing, all those sorts of things, and then you kind of get to the point where this is only the inciting incident. You're only sort of 10-15% into your story, and yet you've written 50,000 words, and you're just thinking, like, what am I going to do? Because I've got to put all this stuff in because Professor Blimp told me it was important. So I'm going to reverse the next two bullet points. If you apply the mindset that every word in every sentence, in every paragraph, in every scene, in every chapter, and every character has to earn their place on the page, earn their place in your book to serve the story, that's not a bad starting point. So, the fact that your protagonist would get her camera and her video out and get a dictaphone out and start describing what she's seen, is that driving your story on? Is that something that your reader is going to need to know, so that they can understand either your story arc or your character arc, or maybe you want to take them off down a blind alley and give them a red herring? That's all part of it, isn't it? But every word, every sentence, every paragraph, every scene, every chapter has to earn its place on the page. And by thinking about that at every stage of at every stage of the story, I don't think too much about that in first draft, to be honest, because first draft I'm telling myself the story, but after that's my kind of motto, and it makes you, it forces you into some tough decisions sometimes. You might have a wonderful scene where your protagonist has gone to the forensic lab, and she's kind of sitting there as the scientists are poring over striation marks on part of an aircraft wing, and she's understanding what that tells you about force, the effects of force and fatigue and all that sort of stuff. You might have written that beautifully, but if all the reader needs to know is that the wing fell off, then find a more dramatic way to tell that, and don't get them into the lab. So every word, sentence, paragraph, scene, chapter, and character. And go through your manuscript with the highlights, print your manuscript up, and just strike out the word, highlight the words and the passages that do hold the plot together, and the rest is filler. So you're now moving from, thank you very much, Professor Blimp, you told me how to investigate an airplane crashing into a mountain. Now I'm in my fiction mode, so I'm going to just use what I need to know. But by knowing what Professor Blimp's told you, hopefully there isn't a Professor Blimp who's an air investigator, but there might be. But if Professor Blimp has told you that, then you kind of which steps in the chain that you can, links in the chain that you can gloss over. I have this sort of saying that I say to my clients is that you don't have to get it right, but don't get it wrong. And sometimes, what do you mean by that? Well, you don't have to describe every part of it, but if you're going into it, if you do need to go into a specific technical detail, a specific procedural detail, don't get that wrong, because you'll get caught out. But if you just need to gloss over, going back to my arrest thing, if you're glossing over from the arrest to the interview, then you don't have to get you don't have to get that right. You don't have to put anything about that, really. You can just put another scene in that breaks the timeline up, and then move straight into the interview and the bit of the interview where the hard questions are being put. But if you have that interview being carried out in a car or in a park, or rather than in the cell block, in the custody block where they're being held, you got it wrong. So you just make sure you get that bit of the interview right, but the rest of it is just gloss over it, and try and kind of focus on the effects on the characters. So the wing and the striation marks and the evidence of patterns and force and that sort of thing, that doesn't have an effect on the character, then is it important? You decide, but it might not. And get someone fresh. I'm sure we all do this anyway before we submit our novels to whether we're self-published or traditionally published or independently published or hybrid, that we'll always get someone else to read them first. But get them to be honest and say, just say to them, look, if you think anything doesn't work, if you think if you lost interest, or you thought any characters weren't earning their place on the page, then point that out to me, and I'll make some changes. Because I don't know about you, but I'm terrible at editing my own work, particularly if it's about a scene that I've really enjoyed writing and I just think it's the most amazing thing that's ever graced a page. It's usually the one that my readers, my pre-readers, will tell me to get rid of because it's just nonsense. But I enjoyed it anyway. Okay, so finding experts then, and how and sourcing advice. Okay, the first thing I'd say is look for reliable online sources first of all. You don't always need to go to an expert on things. There are reliable, and obviously I put reliable online sources because we know that there are many sources out there which purport to be reliable but aren't. So have a browse of online sources. University websites are pretty good to get research from. I would say in my world, in the police world, I would say that the College of Policing website or the Crown Prosecution Service website are mines of information. So have a look at those. And just kind of just be careful, but just know just know the basics. Libraries, obviously, we all should be using libraries anyway, but online and real libraries, and I'm sure it's the same all over the world, but certainly in the UK, if you speak to the librarian, they're usually experts in research themselves, and they dig out the old microfiches, and then you'll spend hours sitting there, with eyes bleeding as you pore over these newspapers from 1823 or whatever, which they happen to keep for no particular reason. Documentaries. So you know, I slavishly watch police documentaries now, and I'm not. It's not because I'm sad, and well, I probably am sad, but I'm not pining for my previous life. But you pick up so much of the characters' worlds in documentaries. You know, just little things like, you know, in a police station, somebody wandering in with, you know, a stack of 4 pizzas late at night because they've all been working long. You just watch the reaction of everybody else. This is, you know, this is fly on the wall stuff. This is really happening. You know, if you want to get anyone's attention, you bring pizzas in, you know, and then suddenly you've got, if I want, honestly, if I wanted to have a meeting at an unsociable time, I would provide. If it was in the evening, I'd get pizzas in. If it was in the morning, I'd get bacon sandwiches in. Yeah, bees to a honeypot. So little things like that you'll pick up in these documentaries, and phraseology, jargon, that sort of thing, you know, and you get the human side as well. You know, you get people kind of snapping at each other in, you know, and you just see how that actually pans out. So it's, you know, they're really good. Trade magazines, Twitter and Facebook, for obviously not for facts, but just to kind of, you know, what's the mood, you know, what's the mood around this, what's the, you know, what are people saying, what kind of things, particularly if you're writing in the modern now. I mean, I'm clearly not in the first blush of youth. So, you know, if I want to know, like, I mean, county lines is a thing in the UK where drug dealers are sent out from London, predominantly from London, out to the counties to deal drugs, and that's got its own kind of jargon and slang around it, and just kind of, you know, just delving into social media, you can pick some of that up quite easily. And then textbooks as well, which I think is probably the old-fashioned version of what I was saying about reliable online sources. So where to find your experts? Now, I would say the first one is probably the most important bit of advice. If you know other authors that have used experts in the field that you're looking for, and have rated them, then that's probably the go-to people. You know, I see it on, you know, on crime social media groups all the time. Does anyone know an expert on this, or does anyone know an expert on that? And you'll get people reply all the time. So recommendations, because then you know you're going to deal with somebody that has spoken to an author before, and you know, an author who you trust, rates them too. But if you can't do that, then, you know, just look on social media. I mean, I was looking for a particular specialism, a forensic linguist, the other day. If that reminds me, they've not replied, and I just found one on Twitter and just just tweeted them and just said, you know, any chance we can have a chat. You know, just have a browse. What, you know, because a lot of people are very sort of keen to put either their current or their previous credentials on the social media, but on their bio. Just have a look around there. You know, just sort of see, you know, how active they are they working in the field that you want. I mean, you know, psychology is a good example of that. I mean, there's so many different psychology fields. In my books, because of the hell I put my central character through, I want her to have some kind of subtle scars of that, going through, you know, subtle psychological scars. So I mean, I'm lucky enough to know a couple of psychologists who are crime writers and understand trauma. So you know, they help me on my books. But, you know, if you're going for a psychologist, make sure you're going for the right field. Yeah, self-published book, well, blogs and self-published books, non-fiction books, I would say as well. You know, look at non-fiction books, credible non-fiction books from people that are kind of, you know the field. Retired professionals, there's loads of us around. You know, somebody that we all love talking about the good old days and now war stories. So channel that and get them to talk about what you need for your story. And of course, university departments as well, if it's highly technical and you want to know about entomology, which is the study of kind of flies and maggots and that sort of thing. You know, you're not going to get that off, you know, in the mainstream. So find a university department. There'll be somebody there that'll be happy to talk to you. So what should you expect from your expert? So you found an expert, and you kind of okay, what are they gonna give me? And this is what you should expect, and it's quite a lot. You should expect them to understand your story. So I always said one of the first questions I always ask is, what do you want to happen? What's your story about? What do you want to happen? Because until I know what your story is about and what you want to happen, I don't know where to take the advice. Because there's, in policing, there's loads of different ways you can take, one scenario. I mean, I talked about our murder course that we run. We give them the same videoed fake, staged murder scene, the same information at the beginning. We've been running the course now for 3 years, and we have an average of about 10 or 12 people on each course. We run it 3 times a year. Never seen the same story twice. So, unless you know where that story is going, how does your expert know what? Unless they know, how do they know what advice to give you? They need to understand your characters. So if you're, if your surgeon, the surgeon is it's a very sort of rule bound, precise individual, then they're not going to cut corners in the operating theatre. If there's somebody that is a bit of a maverick, then they are. So when you're talking to your consultant cardiologist, if they don't ask you what your character's like, then they won't know what's plausible and what's not plausible based on your character. They really should understand the creative process and your needs as an author. They shouldn't enforce their world on your fiction, because your fiction is fiction. We're here with a group called Fictionary, so it's about fiction. So they need to understand the creative process, and they need to understand that probably at what stage you're talking to them. And if I'm doing a manuscript review, I know that we're probably at the stage where any major plot changes are going to make somebody cry in the corner. But if we're talking early on, and we're talking plot and character development, then I will take it different ways, and I work with authors according to where they are in the process. This is really important, to be honest what they don't know. I've so many times I've heard of people that have purported to be experts in absolutely every aspect of crime and policing. It's impossible. I'm going to show you a slide in a minute with my 30 colleagues, all who provide different advice all around crime and policing. And so, they must be honest about what they don't know. If they're not an expert in this field, then don't guess it. And I'll tell you who the worst people of that are, and that's police officers. With people that are in the sciences or whatever, they stay very much within their own tram lines. But police officers will go, oh yeah, I knew someone that worked on counterterrorism once, and yeah, I remember him telling me this. So yeah, this is how it happens. If they don't know it, they've got to tell you they don't know it. Otherwise, they're gonna, you've wasted your time and possibly your money as well. They should provide creative alternatives to storylines that don't work. I think that's you should be entitled to expect that. If your aviation, your air accident investigator was up a mountain, and suddenly your expert says, well, she would never be up the mountain. Other people would do that, and she would do the work back in the lab, but you want her up the mountain. Then they should be able to tell you about circumstances by which she might find herself up the mountain. And that might mean suggesting some tweaks, just before that, or maybe some tweaks to her character, that she's kind of a bit of a control freak and she needs to be up the mountain because she wants to see it all for herself. They should help you find those creative alternatives to allow your story to flourish. If they don't know something, and I mean, and I'm not talking about a whole area they don't know. So one of the things that I'm often asked is, if somebody's arrested in outside Buckingham Palace, which custody centre, which police station would they be taken to? Now, this changes all the time. So instead of guessing and go, oh, I think the nearest one would be Charing Cross, which it probably is, I would say, well, okay, let me park that and I'll get back to you on it. You know, so they should undertake additional research in their field if they can. And likewise, they should recommend others as well. You know, so if they say, well, actually, I don't know that, but I think that sounds more like a lawyer's question rather than a police question. So here's a really good lawyer that's also a writer, or here's a really good lawyer that I know has advised other writers before. You might want to talk to them. And they should be happy to be acknowledged in your, you know, in your acknowledgements at the end of your book. Quite often, the way people write it is that, you know, that thank you to you know, Graham Bartlett for providing advice on policing and procedure. Any deviation from that is, you know, is for creative purpose and my own. So quite often people just put that in. But you know, if they're sure about the advice they've given you, they should be happy that they're in the back of the book. If they're not, they're always, well, there might be reasons why they wouldn't. You know, if they've worked in a sensitive area, or they're still working in an area where they're not supposed to do this, then they might not. But you know, they should be happy to be acknowledged. And then how to treat your experts. So be really clear what you need. So before you contact your expert, right? You know, don't go to them and just say, I need to know everything there is to know about investigating airplanes crashing into mountains. Can you just, you know, so what do you need to know? What do you need? Is this about your plot? Is it about your character? Is it about specific technical questions, or do you want me to check that the way you've written it is, you know, will pass a vaguely knowledgeable reader? So be really clear what you need with them. Ask them whether they want paying or how they want recompense. You know, I do this for a living, so you know, I will be clear about my fees at the beginning. You know, but some might say, well, just, you know, I don't want, you know, I just happy to help. Some might say, well, can you send me a book when it's published? You know, signed book when it's published. You know, but just ask them about that, because it's a difficult question for them to, difficult area for them to raise. I'm terrible at it. You know, I need a business manager really. Um, respect their expertise. So don't, you know, if you, the worst thing you can say to me if I give you advice is, that's all very well, but then I watched Line of Duty the other night and they didn't do it like that, and I just, you know, I'll put the phone down. You know, just respect their expertise, because you've called them for that reason. So respect, and respect their time as well. You know, don't keep coming back to them all the time. I put not too many Columbo moments. Oh, just one more thing, just one more thing, just one more thing. You know, if you said, look, can I have an hour of your time, don't be there 3 hours later still drilling them with questions. So just, it's just about respect really. And promote and acknowledge them if they ask. So, you know, I always ask if you know, because I, going back to that slide where I said about recommendations being the best way of getting people, I always ask people to put a little, you know, thing on social media or tell their friends about me if they like it, and tell your friends. You know, I found this really good aviation investigator, brilliant, you know, really kind, really, you know, gave me lots of information, you know, recommend you use them. And so just, yeah, just to show, you won't be able to read all that in detail, but there, that's my panel of experts. So these are people that signed up with me to provide advice predominantly around things that I don't know. So we've got people who work in the prison service there, fire service, we've got counterterrorism experts, undercover experts, loads of forensic experts, got psychologists, we've got people that are used to, that are firearms experts, people that are specialised in Scotland, because that's different. So, you know, this is my way of showing that actually, you know, I don't know everything. So please don't, you know, but please ask, because I know someone that does. And then that's me, and they're my two books. That's on the a canal in Amsterdam, which I thought was just a nice picture, really. So that's me. And Shane, I'll send you this presentation if you want to send it to people. So any questions? I'll stop the share now so we can see each other's faces.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. So Rashmina asked, if you're an expert on the topic you're writing on, how do you avoid the trap of getting bogged down in detail, especially if it's a topic you're really passionate about in real life, but it's basically just background info in your world building? For example, I'm writing fantasy, but my world has a lot of water scarcity issues, and I'm a water resources manager by training.
That is a fabulous question, because I fell into exactly that trap in Bad for Good, and luckily my agent picked it up. But yeah, I did exactly that, and it is so. This is why, get somebody else to read it, because you can't help it. You will put a lot of stuff around water, water management in your, but even when you're trying to treat it very lightly, you will put that in. I mean, I had far too many characters in Bad for Good, and my agent said, "Well, you've got to cut your cast list down by about half." I said, "Well, you can't. That's how many people investigate a murder." And she said, "Yeah, no one cares. People only care about your characters. So just don't. I mean." The alternative is to not put anything in there about it, and then you're wasting your own expertise. So I would try and follow those principles. That every word, every sentence, every paragraph, every scene, every chapter. But then get someone to read it, because you will have missed stuff. You will put too much in there.
Nice. And then Robin asks, I'm writing about a person who tends coal furnaces, who gets a second-degree burn in his work. How can I research coal and coal furnaces? I've got no contact within the coal industry.
Yeah, and of course the coal industry is dying out, isn't it? So there will be, just by kind of researching. I mean, I don't know what country you're from, but there are there are museums in the UK, the mining museums in various parts of the UK, and particularly in the north of England, where most of the mines were. Just tapping into those sorts of places would be a good start. Certainly in the UK, there's because the miners' strike, which basically was the end of the mining industry, there's a lot of passion around that still. So if you Googled mining villages UK, you'll get a huge number of hits there. I would suggest, which were people who kind of remember the 1980s, and will be able to give you a lot of information about the mining, if that was the area.
Oh, I do. Just a
Robin,
second.
did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I want to say I'm in the U.S. and my story does not center around mining, but around the use of the furnace.
The actual furnace itself.
Yeah, he's not a miner. He's a furnace tender, and he carries the coal around. And the setting is it's in another world fantasy, but it's kind of like the Middle Ages, so there's not a lot of technology, but I have never really handled coal, looked at it, and I want to be able to do that to get more authentic.
Robin, you're not going to believe this, but I think I might know someone who can help. Because in Bad, this is a massive spoiler alert. Well, it's not a huge spoiler alert. In Bad for Good, I had to do some research at the British Engineering, which is an old steam-driven pumping station in Brighton, which used to be coal. Well, it is coal. It is coal-fired, and the coal furnaces. I had to do a lot of research about basically whether you could burn bodies in there. If you message me, if you email me, I will put you in touch with somebody that might be able to help. But certainly, this is an old Victorian massive steam engine. So yeah, the British Engineering it's called, and it's in Brighton. But
So
message me and I'll put you in contact
so
with
you're
them.
talking about a train, right?
No. It's I'm going to.
Oh, you are talking about furnaces then?
I'm talking about a furnace, yeah.
Oh, okay. When you said steam engine, I thought train.
Oh right, no, engineering. I'm going to try and I'm going to multitask. I'm going to try and show you. I'm going to try and show you a picture of it, of what I was talking about. You know how all of our worlds were governed by the pandemic. I know. I visited this place just before lockdown. I just got in there before lockdown. So, so it's this sort of thing. Right, I'm going to share my screen now. I'm getting so technical. Here's I told you my dog will bark. So it's that sort of thing there.
Oh,
And the
interesting. I hadn't seen furnaces looking like that in my little bit of research that I'm asked to
that's the
do.
coal hole there, and that's the furnace itself. So that's the coal goes in there, and it gets up to about 1,000 degrees, something like that. But send me a message, and I'll put you in touch with them.
Okay. Where's your email?
Shane, do you want to put that in the chat, or
Yes.
do you want to do that? I'm happy for anyone to.
I'm trying to save the chat, but I don't see the option.
Oh, did you say you were going to pass the slides out? When the slides come out, I think your email's on there, so I'll.
How do you save the chat this time? I don't see the little dots that normally let you save it.
Oh, that's strange. Don't worry, Robin. I'll get that to you after this. That's absolutely fine. You are so welcome.
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Graham while he's here? Can you tell us more about... Oh, this is Lucy. Hi, Lucy. Can you tell us more about your 4-week course on writing a murder? It sounds superb.
Yeah, sure. So what we do is we start off with a murder scene, and you get you hear the 999 call, the emergency call from a member of the public. You then hear the dispatch call, where the dispatcher gives the officer a little bit more information, and then you get then you're shown the video and photos of a staged murder scene. And then what we do over the 4 weeks, and it's all kind of dripped into you over the period of time, we're kind of emulating the first 48 hours of a murder. So we will say, okay, right now write write what you think might have happened. So it's kind of that, and that would be what you would think of, you'd think about when you first turned up. And then we have kind of video input from Peter James and Ellie Griffiths about how they approach that sort of thing. And then we'll say, right, about this point, then you'll start to get some information from house to house. At this point, you'll get the post-mortem results. At this point, etc., etc. And all the time, you've got tasks where you're building up your story. So where's your story going? What's your lines of inquiry? What do you think might have happened? Who are your suspects? And you're from that one point, you're taking your story fed by okay, now you'll start to get some information from the public because you put a press release out. You're building your story up, and then we say, right, okay, create your protagonist, and you have to create a credible police officer, and they do some research around that and more video logs around that, and then it builds up over the 4 weeks to writing I think it's a 3,000 word piece, which I then critique from that murder. It's kind of peer learning as well. So you're critiquing each other's work, and the support's flying around all over the place. It's really good. I will. Oh, look, someone found it already. Look at that.
Yeah, I've done that.
Oh, Shane. Yeah,
it was Lucy found the link, wasn't it?
All right. So yeah, that's the link. We've just finished one. I think the next one's in October or November or something like that. So yeah, any crime writers, it'd be good. And we do have people from other countries on it as well. So it's not specifically UK.
That's awesome. Hey, any last minute questions? If anyone wants to drop them in the chat or pop their hand up, you're more than welcome to do so. Can beginners join the course? Would it be suitable for beginners?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we have all people of all levels there, because you are learning about writing, but you're learning about how to sort of weave the procedure into the writing. So we have people that I mean, we had someone 2 years ago who's just about to bring out a debut. And then this time we had someone who's I think it's pretty fair to say a multi-million selling independent author. So, you know, and it's a great leveler. It's a great leveler because everyone needs a bit of support.
Right, and then we've just got a lot of thank yous and love for
Oh, that's
Graham
very
in the
kind.
chat,
Thank
basically.
you all. Thank you for listening, and hopefully it's useful. I'm going to send the presentation over to Shane as soon as we finish. So yeah, so Shane will have that. All my contact details will be on there, and particularly any crime writers, give me a call. But as you've just found out, you know, I know about steam engines and furnaces and stuff too. Well, I don't, but I know someone that does. That's why it's good to talk. You never know where you're going to get that from, where you're going to get bits from. So it's good to talk to one another.
Yes, definitely. Okay, well, if no one has any other questions, I will say thank you to Graham. That was awesome, and I think everyone got a ton out of that. So brilliant. And I will see you at the next event.